Ladies and gentlemen, we have been told that the economy is doing well. That is not in doubt. But the question is the economy doing well because there is prudent management of our economy, or that whether this government has introduced some social intervention programs that have in itself created an opportunity for young, ambitious Ghanaians? We hereby submit that the so-called gains were not born out of government's competence in the management of our economy. Rather, the IMF program, debt relief, rising commodity exports, reduced expenditure are the major reasons for the upswing in Ghana's economy, not a re-engineering of the economy. Therefore, my respected friend and colleague, Dr. Foster, must know that these facts expose the government's hypocrisy in telling us that they have prudently managed the economy. The much-touted fiscal consolidation has been attained on the back of a sharply cut expenditures for critical sectors, resulting in lower borrowing needs, and currency appreciation solely due to the weakening of the US dollar, which has led to preference for massive global investment in gold. Also, the debt restructuring, which we started under NPP while in government, in addition to the commodity export boom in gold and cocoa output, led to the big trade surplus which was recently announced. So since May 2023, Ghana has had a $3 billion from Ghana's IMF program, which in turn has unlocked light debt relief and financing. For example, in mid-2025, Ghana's parliament approved a $2.8 billion restructuring deal with 25 official creditors, including China, France, the US, UK, and others. Under this agreement, all debt payments due through 2026 were rescheduled, effectively granting Ghana $2.8 billion in debt service relief it could play with in the budget. So once again, Ghana's economic fortune so far is tied to the IMF program and the windfall, not necessarily due to any re-engineering of the economy. Ladies and gentlemen, let me straight away zoom in to raise an issue of NDC's hypocrisy and double standards. In the 8th Parliament, when they were in opposition, they told the whole world that there was a need to pass an anti-LGBT law. Okay. Basically, they said that to protect our own culture, our religious beliefs, there's a need to pass a law that will criminalize any acts of lesbianism, gayism, etc. They were loud on the streets of Accra. They went into our villages, engaged the media, engaged religious leaders, engaged traditional rulers. 1 year down the line, they've been in office. They have gone quiet on this anti-LGBT law. We hear His Excellency the President play on words, claiming that the government was doing wider consultation to see how the law could be formulated in a better way. Really? But was it not the same law that they said it was okay to be passed? And again, when the mighty minority members decided through private members' bill to now pin them to their own principles, suddenly, after all the processes have been followed and approval given, and the motion was on the other paper, the NDC, through its majority leader, found a way of using procedure to claim that there was no such approval by the speaker, and tried to scapegoat the clerk to parliament. As we speak, they have refused, neglected, and deliberately denied the people of Ghana that anti-LGBT law that they themselves spoke about. To make matters worse, our own curriculum, they have found space to introduce this promotion of sexual rights in the curriculum of our children. When they were exposed, this is what they had to say, that it was a mistake and that an anomaly. What an anomaly? When government documents have been printed, circulated, and signed by no less a person than the sector minister, and through the vigilance of the minority, you get exposed, you now say it was an anomaly. We don't accept this. We hold the view that the NDC used the anti-LGBT law only for power. And now that they are facing the reality, they want to find a way of running away from it. We will insist that they act by their own principle. Ladies and gentlemen, let me also address the issue of gold for reserves. We are not in any way opposed to that policy because the policy was started by us. We, the minority, are again not opposed to the institutionalization of a new vehicle to see to the implementation of that all-important policy. However, we have two major concerns. Concern number one, the establishment of the Gold Board as a regulator and also an operator is in a way directly encouraging galamsey activities. Our water bodies have been polluted. In fact, organized labor last year sounded an alarm and indicated that the galamsey activities have worsened. This government has failed to provide tangible evidence of its commitment in the fight against galamsey. It is clear that they are always involved in a PR gimmick, looking at the optics rather than the substance. They are interested in short-term gains, and today we don't know whether the Gold Board makes a distinction between regularly mined gold or an illicit gold. All we know is that they are talking about their success story, the amount of gold or the tons of gold they have purchased. Yet they fail to tell us whether or not there are measures to fight against illicit gold that are mined through galamsey activities. We are concerned because the future of this country is at stake, and the earlier this government took steps to protect the future of Ghana, the better. Second, we are also concerned about the IMF reported $240 million as of September 2025. There seems to be some confusion between the Gold Board and the Central Bank. But we want to tell the Central Bank, participating in the activities, being part of the feast, and when there are issues, you run away and you want to put the blame squarely at the feet of Gold Board will not wash. The IMF says that the losses came by as a result of Bank of Ghana failing to protect our funds. How can you give money to Gold Board to buy gold and they make losses because of exchange rates differences? How can you be paying fees that by law you are not entitled to pay? How can there ever be a justification that in rolling out a policy there is an economic cost? Let me remind the Central Bank that His Lordship, Justice Afre of blessed memory, in the Salome case, lay down the ground rules, especially the true definition of causing financial loss. The central bank must not forget this. What is happening amounts to a financial loss to the state. We are also aware that respected and senior legal experts within government seem to have warned on this. It is filtered through to us. Therefore, we urge the central bank to immediately take steps to address this. Though we become aware that there was a joint board meeting between central bank and the gold board as a result of the concerns raised by the minority, of which there was a conclusion that artisanal mining model should now go for 9.75 for bullion and 9.55 for unprocessed gold, which is a reduction from the previous 15%. Much as this is commendable, we still think that there are still losses that will have to be considered. We are also aware that central bank is saying that it wants to give some moratorium of 1 month to allow for further deliberations amongst the various parties, the Ministry of Finance, Gold Board, and government, on a sustainable cost-sharing structure for the program. So indeed, if the minority was merely blowing hot air, why have they now decided through joint board meeting to take steps to ensure a sustainable cost structure? We are concerned about these losses. We believe that if indeed we are going to have a gold for oil reserves, the government must take steps to sustain it by ensuring that there is real profits. The approach they have adopted will not help the country. We need money to build roads, to construct hospitals, to build schools, to create jobs. And if the central bank is going to underwrite some of these artificial losses and turn around to tell us that it's an economic cost, we regret to say that the minority will not accept this. We are open to discussions on this matter, and just as we always do, we'll put forward our views. We also want to say that we filed a motion in Parliament. We have become aware that the Speaker has admitted the motion, which would allow for broader engagement and consultation on this matter. We urge the various stakeholders in this Board for Oil Reserve to open up to hear our views so that together we can move this country forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I will proceed to state that at a recent World Economic Forum in Davos, the Canadian Prime Minister delivered a message to the global elite that they did not want to hear. He warned that the old order is not coming back. He described a new world in which major powers use tariffs, supply chains, and financial systems as open tools of pressure and control. He urged that what we call, quote, rules-based international order, unquote, has for many become an exercise in living within a lie, unquote. A system countries feel obliged to join, while privately knowing it no longer works as advertised. For a smaller economy like Ghana, this is not an abstract debate. It is a direct challenge. It means we cannot rely on comfortable stories of mutual benefit when the structures of global integration are being used as instruments of leverage. This new world demands 3 clear responses from Ghana. First, we must build a truly strong and resilient domestic economy. We need enough strategic autonomy that no outside power can bend us through debt traps, currency gains, or control over one key export. Economic sovereignty cannot remain a slogan. It must become the solid foundation of an independent foreign policy. Second, we must deliberately diversify our international relationship. We must deepen ties across Africa and engage carefully with traditional partners in the United States, European Union, UK, China, Canada, and with emerging powers, without surrendering our sovereignty to any single dominant player. Third, and most important, we must root our foreign policy in the constitutional values we live by at home. A so-called pragmatic foreign policy that turns a blind eye to impunity, corruption, and injustice inside our borders is not realism. It is a performance of sovereignty that hides a quiet acceptance of dependence. We cannot project moral clarity abroad if we refuse to practice it at home. Take Ghana's ambition to mediate between ECOWAS and the Alliance of Sahel States. It is a worthy and necessary goal, and it reflects the traditional leadership role Ghana often claims. But moral authority is never something a country can simply declare. It is earned gradually through steady action at home. It rests on the integrity of a nation's own institutions. A government that tolerates opaque, loss-making schemes orchestrated by the central bank, that turns prosecution into political weapon, that attacks judicial independence by unconstitutionally removing a chief justice, and that allows ongoing destruction of our rivers, is steadily destroying the very credibility it wishes to display abroad. Real sovereignty in diplomacy is built on domestic accountability. A nation earns the right to be a principled foreign policy by making its own society more resilient, transparent, and just, so that it is less vulnerable to pressure and less easily silent. Before Ghana can credibly reconcile other nations, it must first bring its own practice into line with its proclaimed values. Our influence abroad will always be limited by the strength of our integrity as well. And by the way, we have seen that my Lord Bafuboni and his management are all over at the various ministries, including Jubilee. Is he on a thank you tour? Is my Lord Bafuboni on a thank you tour, thanking the government for appointing him as a Chief Justice? And we hear today he is coming to Parliament. We, the minority, don't see him as a tolerant head of the judiciary, because members of the minority came under attack when we criticized the processes leading to his nomination. We will therefore not be part of his thank you tour. If he wants to engage us, our offices are open. He should come and engage us, and we'll let him know things that we find wrong. Colleagues, members of the media, let me emphasize that the macroeconomic figures from last year, although real on the surface, encouraging as well. We are aware that inflation has dropped from the peak in the 20s to single digits. We are aware that government is now touting it as its own successes. But instead of welcoming, we must ask, stability for whom and at what long-term costs? Think of economic policy as a bridge connecting the state to its citizens. On one side of that bridge are the conference rooms in Accra, where ministers display tidy charts and quote IMF reports. On the other side are the market of Ifutu, the busy streets of Tamale and the households. Ghanaians experience the economy not as statistics, but as struggles with food prices, utility bills, and the search for decent work. In 2025, that bridge broke. Inflation fell on paper, but the cost of a simple meal remained beyond reach for many families. Growth accelerated in the aggregate, but around 1.25 million young people were left outside employment, education, or training. A generation waiting on the margins. Macroeconomic stability improved, yet an estimated majority of water bodies are polluted, and energy sector debt still sits in the billions of dollars. This gap has a clear cause. The current stabilization rests heavily on the tight IMF conditions, new levies imposed on already burdened citizens, and continued dependence on the same narrow export of gold and cocoa. Now, instead of introducing reforms in the energy sector, they decided to impose levies. Remember that they said e-levy was bad and they were going to scrap it. They were going to outlaw it. And Ghanaians celebrated them when they repealed the e-levy. But let's look at some numbers. They took away e-levy, but utility tariffs alone, so far, we have seen an excess of 27%. Electricity tariffs under Akufo-Addo, where we're paying e-levy at 1.5%. And they were telling us, the NDC told us that it is too much. Today, electricity tariffs have gone up in excess of 27%. That is NDC hypocrisy for you. They also came to Parliament in the dead of night to introduce the Dumso levy, which upon our scrutiny, they decided to suspend it. But again, in the dead of night, they started the implementation. So Ghanaians are being burdened with all these levies, yet they claim that they are carrying government. Let me repeat that the current stabilization rests heavily on the tight IMF conditions. And like I said, they've imposed new levies. Deep structural weakness from inefficiencies in the energy sector to bottlenecks in agriculture remain largely untouched. This is not transformation. It is a postponement of crisis wrapped in a polished statement. So for agriculture, let me ask our respected colleague, Eric. He is a very intelligent parliamentarian. I don't doubt his understanding of the agro sector. But talk is cheap. It is not about his talking. Today I want to ask my respected colleague, Honorable Eric Opoku, the minister responsible for agriculture, to hold a press conference and tell Ghanaians the real policies that have been introduced to help promote agriculture. There is none. In the fishery sector, the least said about them, the better. So really, this government talks so much in opposition, but in government, there is nothing they've done in the agro and the fisheries sectors to promote growth, and we see it in that field. I'm sure later Dr. Iwai Opoku would expatiate on this with the numbers for you. Now they promised 24-hour economy. And the 24-hour economy, they said, 1 job, 3 shifts. So each job will carry 3 people. And they said, oh, even if you want to do farming, there will be a system where you can farm at night. They said, oh, you can sell your wachi in the night. That's what they told us. But today, after voting for them, what do we see? Even Ghanaian youth who gained employment as far back as 2017 were all sacked. When the minority introduced a motion to question the Chief of Staff's letter directing these mass dismissals, the first strategy that the majority deployed was to hold a preliminary objection, which the first deputy speaker came with an already prepared written ruling even before he heard the argument. And when we filed a motion for review of this repugnant ruling, Mr. Speaker found a way of denying us a voice. It is taking 8 months, an important matter that affects the livelihood of Ghanaians. And I want Ghanaian youth to hear this. Matters that would involve the restoration of their jobs. Parliament refused to give the minority a voice. They used procedure. Each time we raised it, they told us, oh, the speaker says he wants to preside himself, the speaker will preside himself.